Hi, in this video I'm going to take a look at the recently released Gem EQP plugin, a Pultec emulation from Overloud, and I'm going to compare it to the UAD Pultec emulation and to my hardware Pultec cloned by Warm Audio. So let's go! So let's dive right into the product page of their website. So Pultec is a passive equalizer, and Overloud is saying here that they're going beyond the original hardware. It's 3 units in one. It's the famous low and high bands of a Pultec, which I'll show you more in detail later. It's the mid bands module, and it's the high and low cut module. And they're going beyond the original hardware by the fact that they have an additional clipper. They're displaying the EQ curve, and you can set the unit to a different calibration level to change the generation of harmonics. So let's have a look at this in a Cubase project. On top of here you can see an acoustic guitar track of a new song of my band The Wash that I'm currently working on. It's called Always Yours and it'll probably be released somewhere in the next half year or so. And on that I've put the new Gem EQP plugin, which I'm currently running in demo mode. They have a 14-day full-featured trial, so by all means go and try out the plugin yourself. Now on the top bar of the plugin you can see over here that, well, we need to turn it on. There's various presets. You can save presets, you can do A/B comparisons. And the first real interesting part here is that you can link the in and out level, so that you can drive the plugin with these buttons. And the more you drive it, the more harmonic content is generated. So let's have a listen to that on this acoustic guitar track. Well, it's subtle, but if you look at the plugin in Plugin Doctor, and if you look at the harmonic analysis in Plugin Doctor, you see that the plugin is fed by a 1K test tone, and these additional peaks that you see over here are generated harmonics. And if I now increase the level on the input, you can see that some of the harmonics increase as well. So yes, it does do something. It's interesting though that if I turn on the oversampling, which is in this menu, the input level no longer seems to change the harmonic content. So I don't know exactly what's happening there, but this may still be a bug in the initial version of this plugin. I'm currently running version 101. Now let's get back to Cubase and go into a little bit more detail. So over here you can see that you have various preferences that you can change. Also the unit calibration level. And yes, if you select a different calibration level, the generated harmonics that you just witnessed in Plugin Doctor will also slightly change. Let's enable oversampling and have a listen to the rest. So there is an additional clipper here on the right side, but on this acoustic guitar track, it doesn't really do a lot. It's mostly useful on tracks that have a lot of transient content like drums or percussion. And if you want to know how I use clippers in my workflow, I have a separate video on that, which I'll link to in the description. But let's have a further listen to this acoustic guitar track while I shape it a bit with the mid module, the low-high module, and the filters. So in this case I added a bit of low mids to make the sound a bit thicker. I boosted some 12K to give it a bit more sparkle and shine, but that made it a little bit harsh to me, so I also engaged the high cut filter to cut off some of the very high frequencies, which seemed to tame it a bit. So let's now have a look at how I would typically use this on a kick drum and compare it to another Pultec plugin from UAD and to my Pultec hardware by Warm Audio. So I've now expanded the kick test in this folder, and you can see that I have 3 copies of a kick in track and a kick out track, and both of those tracks are going to a group, which includes then either my Warm Audio hardware via an external plugin in Cubase. And even though this is called 76 and EQ, but currently only the equalizer, the Warm Audio Pultec clone, is patched in. On the next copy of the tracks, I'm running the UAD plugin. And on the third copy of tracks, I'm running the Gem EQP plugin, where I'm only using the low-high section for this comparison. Now, if you look at this picture of how I've set the warm audio, you can see that the low frequency has been set to 60 Hz, which is the fundamental of the kick drum. And it has been boosted and cut at the same time, which is the infamous Pultec trick, because it basically boosts the very low frequencies and then it immediately does a cut on the low mids, providing more room for the bass guitar, for example. Now at the same time, I'm also boosting at 5 kHz, which is where the clicky sound of this kick is, and it's a moderate boost, fairly broad. So let's first have a listen to this sound without Pultec EQ, and then I'll engage the Pultec EQ, and you can see that it makes a lot of difference. Now obviously there's level difference as well, but I think you can clearly hear the difference as well between the much more flabbier sounding direct tracks and the much more juicy and tighter track with the Pultec on there. Now in order to match the sound of the Warm Audio Pultec, I initially dialed in the exact same settings, and then I checked in Plugin Doctor whether the curve was actually the same, and then I compensated as much as possible. And that gave this result. This is the matched curve between the hardware, which is the gray line, and the UAD plugin, which is the pink line. I couldn't get it exactly the same, but you can see that the shape is very much the same. There's only a little level difference, but I compensated for the different level on all of these tracks. So I tried to get them to sound the same as much as possible. And on the UAD, this led to these settings, which for the low part are quite the same as on the hardware, but for the 5 kHz frequency, I had to boost much more and I had to make the bandwidth a lot sharper to get a similar shape for the EQ curve. Now I did the same thing for the Gem EQP. These are the curves in Plugin Doctor after I tried to match them as closely as possible. Again, the gray choppy line is the hardware and the pink line is the Gem EQP plugin. Biggest difference seems to be in the frequencies above 10K, where the Gem EQP falls off a bit more sharply than my hardware emulation. Obviously, the hardware emulation is by Warm Audio, so it's not exactly an original Pultec either. So it could be that the Gem EQP is actually more true to the original hardware. Now I needed to set the Gem EQP like this. So again, the low band, quite similar. But the high band, yeah, I still had to set the boost and the bandwidth a little bit different from the hardware, but not so drastically different as for the UAD plugin. So let's have a listen to the differences. So what do you think? I think the sound is quite similar, especially if you compare it to the original tracks, but you can hear slight differences. Which one do you prefer? Now before we go to the comparison on vocal, if you like this video by now, please give it a thumbs up for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel and ring the little bell icon so you know when I post another video. And if you happen to be planning a purchase of any kind, please have a look at my affiliate links in the description. If you click on those links and then buy anything in those stores, I get a small commission without it costing anything extra for you. So that's highly appreciated. Now let's have a look at the vocal comparison. Okay, so these are the vocal tracks, and the vocal tracks that I'm using for this are actually from a wash song called 500 Miles, recorded by Perfect Sounds Unleashed. So I have a dry vocal track without anything on it. I have a vocal track with my external plugin with just the Warm Audio EQ patched in. I have a vocal track with the UAD plugin, and I have a vocal track with the Gem EQP plugin. Now the processing that I did on the hardware, you can see over here. I did a bit of low cutting on the vocal to get rid of some of the very low end. I set it to 20 Hz, but actually the low cut extends quite high on these Pultecs. So I didn't pull it down too much, it's somewhere around 1. And I used the medium bandwidth for a bit of a boost at 12K to get some air into the vocal. So let's listen to the difference between the dry vocal and the one with the hardware Pultec.
Storm is rising, the wind is crying, stars are falling down. Hope is rising, the world is trying.
Yeah, so the process track has more air and is more likely to cut through in a dense mix. Now again, I try to match the settings on my Warm Audio Pultec by using Plugin Doctor. And these are the curves that I managed to get to on the UAD. And that led to these settings on the UAD for the vocal. The boosts and cuts needed to be set a bit more extreme compared to the hardware. And actually the high frequency, I also had to set slightly different, 10K instead of 12K, to get a match in Plugin Doctor. Now same thing for the Gem EQP. These are the curves, very similar, just not exactly the same in level. And the same as on the UAD, actually I had to choose a different high frequency to get a similar curve. So let's again listen to the differences.
Storm is rising, the wind is crying, stars are falling down. Hope is rising, the world is trying to keep those stars in place. Put a smile back on your face. Storm is rising, the wind is crying, stars are falling down. Hope is rising, the world is trying.
So again, what do you think? Can you hear a difference on YouTube? It always adds extra compression on the audio, so the differences may be harder to hear. But that's also the reason why I provided these tracks exported as a download with the link in the description. So you can have a much closer and more detailed listen in your own DAW if you want to. But what about performance? Well, let's have a quick look. This is a project in which I made a lot of copies of the acoustic guitar track. And on every acoustic guitar track I have the Gem EQP with the same settings. And oversampling is on. And I can only say that the performance is really negligible. I had to create 128 duplicate tracks with Gem EQs on there to even see something on the performance meter here. So yeah, how much is this? Maybe about 10% of the CPU now. And if I start playing, it doesn't really change very much. So this is definitely an EQ that you could put on basically all tracks in your project, if you wanted to. Now in general, I think it's a very good sounding EQ, a very good sounding Pultec emulation. I think it resembles my Warm Audio hardware slightly better than the UAD plugin, although all three options are very usable in any project that you might care to use them in. They basically all sound good and usable to me at least. What do you think? Let me know in the description if you have any remarks about what you heard. I have seen a couple of reports about bugs in this early version of the plugin, specifically about the frequency of the low band not being quite accurate, that basically you had to set it to 30 Hz to boost at 60 Hz or vice versa. I didn't really notice this in my test, even when looking at it in Plugin Doctor, but I did notice a slightly weird behavior when oversampling was on, and driving the input didn't actually increase the harmonics that Plugin Doctor was measuring. So that seems to be weird, because that was working okay when I turned oversampling off. But I'm sure that any bugs that are currently in this first version will be fixed soon, if they are indeed bugs. And by all means, try it out yourself before you buy, so you know exactly how it behaves on your system. And currently I see there's an introductory offer of the plugin costing 69 euros instead of the regular 129. But I'm not sure how long that'll last. Maybe it won't even last until the release date of this video, so check out their site to see the latest price. The next video is another comparison of an EQ plugin to hardware, and that's the Kniff Soma EQ by Plugin Alliance. Have a look at that, enjoy, and see you soon.